Are you ready to grow your business, build wealth, and spark transformation in the south suburbs of Chicago? Visit southlanddevelopment.org today and sign up for our newsletter to stay connected, get resources, and be the first to hear about the Achieve Summit, where entrepreneurs, developers, investors, and changemakers come together to ignite growth and opportunity. Don't just watch change happen, be a part of it. Join the movement at southlanddevelopment.org and start building your legacy today. Welcome back to The First Million is Always the Hardest. I'm Kemp. For decades, we've been told the same story about entrepreneurship, that success starts with an idea and building something from scratch. But what if the smartest path to ownership isn't starting a business, it's buying one? In this special solo episode, I'm breaking down entrepreneurship through acquisition, why buying businesses can dramatically improve your odds of success, and why the retirement of millions of baby boomer owners may create the greatest ownership opportunity of the next generation. Let's talk about why sometimes the best way to build is to buy. There's a story we've all been told about entrepreneurship. You hear it everywhere. You hear it on social media, you hear it in business school, you hear it in startup culture. The story goes something like this. If you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to start something. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have to come up with an idea. You have to build it from nothing. You have to bootstrap it from the garage. You have to stay up all night, writing code, pitching investors, hustling your way from zero customers to your first sale. And somewhere along the way, if everything goes right, maybe, just maybe, you'll build something valuable. But here's the truth. I've come to understand, after decades of working in business, raising capital, acquiring assets, building platforms, and sitting across the table from entrepreneurs, investors, bankers, business owners across the country. Starting something from scratch isn't the only path to entrepreneurship, and in many cases, it's not even the smartest one. The truth is, the first million is always the hardest, and it becomes exponentially harder when you start from zero. Today, I want to talk about something that is quietly becoming one of the most powerful wealth strategies available to the next generation of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, or ETA. Buying businesses instead of starting them. Buying momentum instead of guessing at demand, buying cash flow instead of hoping for it, buying infrastructure instead of inventing it. And I want to talk about this not just from a theory, but from data, not just from perspective of an investor or academics. I want to talk about it from my experience, because my own entrepreneurial journey has included acquisitions that fundamentally changed the trajectory of the business that I've been a part of building. One of those acquisitions is something called the Impact Music Conference. And that deal became the seed of something much, much bigger. The acquisition that changed everything. Before you've heard of Vanguarde Media, for those of you who have, before we began building a media platform, before the capital was raised, before the expansion into multiple assets, there was one strategic acquisition, and it was the Impact Music Conference. Now, on the surface, some people might have looked at that deal and said, oh, so you bought a conference. But that's not what I saw. When we acquired Impact Music Conference for less than $2 million, we weren't buying an event. We were buying a platform. We were buying an ecosystem. We were buying something that had already proven its relevance in the marketplace. Impact had credibility. It had brand recognition. It had a built-in audience. It had industry relationships, sponsors, vendors. It had media exposure, distribution channels. It had institutional knowledge. And it had people who already trusted the brand. Now think about what it would have taken to start all of that from scratch. Think about the time. Think about the capital. Think about the marketing spend. And not to mention the risk. The number of years it might take before a brand new conference built from nothing could achieve the same level of recognition. And that's when you begin to understand the power of an acquisition. Because when you buy something that already works, you're not guessing whether the market wants it. The market's already answered that question. When we acquired Impact, we weren't starting the race from the beginning of the starting line. We were stepping into the race that was already halfway down the track. And that acquisition became the foundation for something much, much bigger. It became the foundation for Vanguarde Media. And from that platform, we expanded. We layered additional media assets. We built content distribution. We added publishing properties. We developed new verticals. We built relationships across the media ecosystem, leveraging the platform acquisition. And because we started with infrastructure, because we started with proof, we started with a platform that already had traction. We were able to raise over $60 million in capital across ventures connected to that ecosystem. Now, let me say something important here. Investors rarely fund ideas. They fund traction. Banks rarely lend money against dreams. They fund cash flow. And institutions fund platforms. They fund infrastructure. They fund things that already demonstrate value. Buying impact wasn't about owning a single conference. It was about controlling a platform that could scale. And that's what entrepreneurship through acquisition really is. It's not just buying a single business, it's buying leverage. The myth of the startup. Now let's talk about something that gets almost no attention in the mainstream entrepreneurial conversations. The myth of the startup. The startup story is exciting. It's dramatic. It's cinematic. It's the founders who start with nothing and build something that changed the world. But statistically, that story is incredibly rare. Roughly 90% of all startups fail. Most of them fail within 5 years, not because the founders are stupid, not because the founders lack passion, and not because the founders aren't working hard. They fail because starting a business from scratch means fighting multiple battles at the same time. You're trying to build a product. You're trying to validate a market. You're trying to create brand awareness from scratch. You're trying to establish distribution. You're trying to hire new employees. You're trying to manage your cash flow. You're trying to attract customers who've never heard of you or your company. And you're doing all of this at the same time while you're burning capital. Now contrast that with buying a business that already exists. When you acquire a company, you're not starting from zero revenue. You're not starting from zero customers or zero systems. You're not starting with zero credibility. You're buying something that already operates in the real world. And you're buying a business that already has demonstrated that people are willing to pay something for what you're offering. You're buying proof. It doesn't eliminate risk, but it changes the type of risk that you're taking. Starting a business from scratch is market risk plus operational risk plus financial risk all at the same time. Buying a business reduces the uncertainty around the market. You already know customers exist. Now your job becomes operating, improving, growing something that already works. That's fundamentally a different challenge. The demographic opportunity. Now let's zoom out and talk about something much bigger than individual entrepreneurs. There's a demographic shift that's happening right now. Something economists often refer to as the silver tsunami. Every single day in the United States, more than 10,000 baby boomers retire. Many of those retirees own a business, small and mid-sized companies, family-owned companies, regional businesses, manufacturing firms, construction, distribution, professional businesses, retail operations, everything under the sun. These businesses, many of them, are profitable. Many of them generate strong cash flow. Many of them have been operating successfully for decades. But here's the problem. A large percentage of those owners don't have a succession plan. Their children don't want the business. They've spent decades running the company and never thought about how they'd exit, so they never built an exit plan. Some of them assume they'll just close the doors when they retire. Others assume that someone will magically appear to buy the company. But selling a business requires a tremendous amount of preparation. It requires valuation, financial clarity. It requires a transition plan. Without buyers, these businesses simply disappear. And when businesses disappear, communities suffer. Jobs vanish, local economies weaken, tax bases shrink. And maybe equally or most importantly, institutional knowledge disappears within these verticals. But if there are buyers, the story changes. Employees keep their job, communities retain economic anchors, and there's a transfer of wealth instead of having that wealth evaporate in the case where no one buys the business. ETA isn't just about personal opportunity, it's about economic continuity, it's about stewardship. Ownership is economic development. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship through acquisition is because I see it not just as a personal wealth strategy, but as an economic development strategy. At the Southland Development Authority, we spend a lot of time thinking about what happens when businesses transition from one generation of ownership to the next. Because ownership matters. Ownership determines where profits go. Ownership determines whether a company reinvests locally. Ownership determines whether jobs remain in a specific community. When local entrepreneurs buy local businesses, wealth circulates locally. Employees remain connected to stable employers. Communities maintain their economic identity. But when businesses close or are absorbed by distant owners with no connection to the community, something's often lost. ETA gives us an opportunity to preserve the businesses that already exist while empowering a new generation of owners. And that new generation has the potential to look very different than the previous one. Generation of owners. Historically, business ownership in the United States has been concentrated in a relatively narrow demographic, but that time is changing. And entrepreneurship through acquisition can accelerate that change. Women represent an enormous untapped opportunity in business ownership. Veterans possess leadership experience and operational discipline that translates extremely well to managing companies. And graduate students and MBA students train in finance, strategy, and management, but are often overlooked for small business acquisitions as a career path. Imagine what happens when these groups of people begin acquiring businesses. Imagine the ripple effects, the new leadership styles. Imagine the innovation applied to businesses that have been operating the same way for decades. The next generation of owners does not have to look like the last one. And that shift could redefine the landscape of American entrepreneurship. Mechanics of wealth through acquisition. Let's talk about something practical. How wealth actually gets built through acquisition. Consider a business generating $400,000 in annual seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE. Maybe it produces $1.5 million of revenue. Depending on the industry, that business might sell for around 3 times earnings, or maybe the purchase price of $1.2 million. Through SBA financing, the buyer might only need to put 10 to 20% down. The rest can be financed. The cash flow of the business services the debt. Over time, debt is paid down. Every year, the buyer's equity increases as the loan balance decreases. At the same time, the buyer may improve operations, increase revenue, expand margins, add new services, or acquire new competitors. Over time, the value of the business grows. And that's the power of the leverage combined with cash flow. You're not relying on speculation. You're relying on an economic engine of an existing company. This is how many fortunes have been built quietly for decades, not through flashy startups, but through disciplined ownership. What buyers need to understand. But let's be honest about something. Buying a business is not passive income. It's not easy money. It's not buying a vending machine. When you acquire a company, you inherit responsibility. That includes employees, customers, vendors, a reputation that goes with that business, a culture. You also inherit the emotional reality of the seller. For many owners, selling their business is like giving away a piece of their identity. You have to build trust. You must demonstrate respect. You must show that you care for the business that they built and that you're willing to conduct serious due diligence. You got to understand the financials, evaluate customer concentration, make sure you're assessing all of the operational systems, examining the working capital requirements, studying contracts, identifying key businesses and dependencies. ETA requires discipline. It requires patience, humility, leadership. But when done well, it creates an opportunity that starting from scratch rarely does. A different way to think about entrepreneurship. I think we need to redefine what entrepreneurship means. Entrepreneurship is not only invention, it's also stewardship. It's also preservation. It's improvement. It's taking something that already works and making it stronger. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs in history built their empires through acquisition, not through invention. Buying companies, integrating operations, expanding markets, compounding value over time. That strategy exists at every single scale, from $1 billion conglomerate to a small business ownership in local communities. And it may be one of the most overlooked opportunities for the next generation. The call to action. If this conversation resonates with you, I want you to do a few things. First, follow the Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition series on this podcast. We're talking to buyers, sellers, lenders, and advisors. We're exploring how deals actually happen. Second, attend the Achieve Summit June 4th through 6th, 2026 at Wind Creek Casino here in the area. If you're serious about ownership, if you want to understand how acquisitions work, if you want to meet people who are actively buying and selling businesses, that's where you're going to have those conversations, and that's where they're happening. Third, I want you to think differently about ownership. Stop asking the idea of what you should start and start asking businesses what you should buy. Fourth, if you're a retiring business owner, I want you to think about your legacy. Think about the employees who've helped build you and your company. Think about the community that supported you. Consider who will steward that business after you're gone, long after you're gone. And consider working with the Southland Development Authority to prepare your business for sale. Because preparation can increase value. Preparation can attract buyers, and preparation can ensure that what you built continues. Final reflection. Let me leave you with this thought. The world does not need more ideas. Ideas are everywhere. What the world needs are owners. People who are willing to take responsibility, people who are willing to steward companies, people who are willing to preserve the business and the power of those communities. The first million is always the hardest, but it gets a lot easier when you buy something that already works. And the greatest opportunity of the next generation may not be building the next startup. It may be buying the existing businesses that already exist and leading them into the future. I'll see you at the next Achieve Summit, June 4th through 6th, and I'll see you in the next episode of The First Million is Always the Hardest.